Every single country on Earth owes money. The United States carries over $35 trillion in debt. Japan sits at nearly 250% of its entire economic output. Even wealthy nations like Germany, oil-rich Saudi Arabia, and economic powerhouses like China all owe staggering amounts. But here's the question that should keep you awake at night. If everyone owes money, who exactly is getting paid? The answer isn't what you think. And once you understand it, you'll never look at your tax bill the same way again. This is a story about the greatest financial illusion of our time. A system so clever, so deeply embedded in how the world works that most people never question it. They just accept that debt is normal, that governments borrowing trillions is somehow necessary, and that the interest payments flowing out of their wallets every year through taxes are just the cost of civilization. But what if I told you that this entire system was designed not by accident, but by intention? What if the real purpose of government debt isn't to fund roads and schools and hospitals, but to create a permanent transfer of wealth from ordinary people to a very specific group of beneficiaries? What if debt isn't a burden at all, but the most profitable business model ever invented? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on global debt. We're going to trace the money from your pocket to the bank accounts of people you've never heard of. We're going to reveal who really wins when governments borrow and why the system is designed to keep borrowing forever. Because once you see how this machine actually works, you'll understand why your government will never, ever pay off its debt, and why that's exactly how some people want it. Let's start with a number that should terrify you. Global government debt has reached $102 trillion. That's not a typo, $102 trillion. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire world economy produces in a single year. It's money that every man, woman and child on the planet is somehow responsible for, even though most of them had no say in how it was borrowed or where it went. But here's what makes this number truly insidious. It's growing faster than ever before. In just the last year, global debt increased by $5 trillion. Over the past decade, it has exploded by $42 trillion. This isn't gradual growth. This is exponential acceleration. And the human cost is staggering. Right now, 3.4 billion people live in countries that spend more money paying interest on their debt than they spend on healthcare or education combined. Think about that. Nearly half the world's population lives under governments that prioritize debt payments over keeping their citizens healthy or educated. In developing countries alone, interest payments reached $921 billion last year. That's money that could have built hospitals, funded schools, or provided clean water. Instead, it flows directly into the accounts of bondholders. And those bondholders, they're not who you think they are. When most people imagine government debt, they picture countries borrowing from other countries. China lending to America, or Europe lending to Africa. The reality is far more complex and far more profitable for a very specific class of people. The truth is that most government debt isn't held by foreign governments at all. It's held by private investors, pension funds, insurance companies, and investment banks. In the United States, roughly 2/3 of the national debt is owned by American institutions and wealthy individuals. In other words, the government borrows money from its own wealthy citizens, then uses tax revenue collected from everyone else to pay them interest. This is the most elegant wealth transfer system ever devised. The poor and middle class pay taxes. The government uses those taxes to pay interest to the rich who own the bonds. It's a direct pipeline from working people's paychecks to the investment portfolios of the wealthy. And it's completely legal, completely normalized, and completely invisible to most of the people paying for it. But it gets worse. Much worse. In many developed countries, around 30 to 40% of government bonds are held by foreign investors. That means when Americans pay taxes, a significant portion of that money leaves the country entirely, flowing to wealthy individuals and institutions in other nations. The same pattern repeats across the globe. British taxpayers fund German bondholders. Japanese workers subsidize American pension funds. It's a global network of wealth extraction disguised as responsible fiscal policy. The beneficiaries of this system aren't just wealthy individuals. They're the largest financial institutions on Earth. Investment banks, insurance companies, sovereign wealth funds, and pension systems that manage trillions in assets. These institutions don't just hold government debt as a safe investment. They actively shape government policy to ensure that debt keeps growing and interest keeps flowing. And here's the truly diabolical part of the system. It's designed to be permanent. Governments today don't plan to pay off their debt. They plan to refinance it forever. When a bond matures, they don't pay it back with savings. They issue a new bond to pay off the old one. It's a perpetual cycle that ensures interest payments flow forever. This isn't an accident. It's not poor planning or fiscal irresponsibility. It's the entire point. The system was engineered this way because debt has become the foundation of modern money itself. Every dollar, euro, yen, and pound in circulation represents debt somewhere in the system. When central banks create new money, they don't print it and hand it out for free. They create it by purchasing government bonds, which are promises to pay interest forever. This is where the illusion becomes complete. The money in your wallet isn't backed by gold or silver or anything tangible. It's backed by your government's promise to tax you and your children to pay interest to bondholders. Your currency is literally an IOU that you're responsible for honouring, even though you never signed it. Central banks have become the ultimate enablers of this wealth transfer. When governments need to borrow more than private investors are willing to lend, central banks step in and create money out of thin air to buy the bonds themselves. They call this quantitative easing, but it's really just a fancy name for printing money to keep the debt machine running. The Bank of Japan owns nearly half of all Japanese government debt. The Federal Reserve holds trillions in US Treasury bonds. The European Central Bank has purchased massive quantities of government debt from member nations. These aren't emergency measures. They're permanent features of the system, designed to ensure that governments can always borrow more no matter how much debt they already carry. But here's what makes this truly sinister. When central banks create money to buy government bonds, they're not just enabling more debt, they're inflating the money supply, which devalues every dollar in your savings account. Your purchasing power shrinks while bondholders get paid with freshly created money. It's a double tax. First through inflation, then through the taxes needed to pay bond interest. The beneficiaries understand this perfectly. They hold assets that rise in value when money is created: real estate, stocks, commodities, and yes, government bonds. Meanwhile, ordinary people hold cash and earn wages that lose value every time the central bank fires up the printing press. The wealth gap isn't growing by accident, it's growing by design. This is why inflation has become a permanent feature of modern economies. It's not a bug in the system. It's the primary mechanism for transferring wealth from savers to debtors, from workers to asset owners, from the many to the few. Every percentage point of inflation is a percentage point of purchasing power stolen from anyone who holds cash or earns a fixed income. And the beautiful part, from the perspective of the beneficiaries, is that most people blame inflation on supply chains or pandemics or geopolitical tensions. They never connect it to the money creation that funds government debt. The cause is invisible. The effect is blamed on everything except the actual source. Some countries have tried to break free from this system. They've attempted to pay down their debt, to stop borrowing, to escape the cycle. But they quickly discover that the global financial system punishes nations that don't play the debt game. Credit ratings agencies downgrade countries that refuse to borrow. International markets become hostile. Trade becomes more expensive. The pressure to return to debt financing becomes overwhelming. This is why even the most fiscally conservative governments eventually give in. The system isn't designed to allow escape. It's designed to ensure participation. Once you're in the debt system, leaving becomes nearly impossible without severe economic consequences. Japan offers the most extreme example of where this leads. With debt at nearly 250% of GDP, conventional economics suggests the country should have collapsed decades ago. Instead, Japan has become a case study in how far the debt system can be pushed when it's managed properly. The Bank of Japan owns nearly half of all government debt, and most of the rest is held domestically by Japanese institutions. What Japan proves is that debt sustainability isn't about the size of the debt. It's about who owns it and what currency it's denominated in. As long as a government borrows in its own currency and maintains control over its central bank, it can theoretically borrow infinite amounts. The only constraint is inflation, and even that can be managed through careful manipulation of interest rates and money supply. This revelation should change how you think about government promises. When politicians debate spending on infrastructure or healthcare or education, they're not really debating whether the country can afford it. They're debating whether the bondholders will profit from it. Every government program, every policy initiative, every public investment is ultimately a question of how it affects the debt system and the people who benefit from it. The next time you hear a politician worry about leaving debt to future generations, remember who those future generations will be paying. It won't be foreign enemies or abstract creditors. It will be the same wealthy individuals and institutions who profit from the system today. So there you have it. The answer to who really benefits when every country has debt. It's not foreign nations holding us hostage. It's not some shadowy conspiracy. It's a perfectly legal, perfectly transparent system that funnels wealth from the many to the few through the simple mechanism of government borrowing. Every tax payment you make includes interest that flows to bondholders. Every dollar printed to buy government debt dilutes the value of money in your pocket. Every year this system operates, the wealth gap grows wider. Not by accident, but by design. The most chilling part isn't that this system exists, it's that it's presented as normal, as necessary, as the responsible way to manage a modern economy. Politicians will debate whether to spend on schools or roads, but they'll never question why that spending must be financed through debt that enriches private investors forever. You've been told that government debt is your burden, your responsibility, your children's inheritance. But now you know the truth. Government debt isn't your burden at all. It's someone else's gold mine, and you're the one digging the gold. The system works exactly as intended. The only question is whether you'll keep pretending it doesn't. If this changed how you see the world, subscribe. There's more to uncover, and most people will never bother to look.